18 innocent lives. Does the death penalty deter? Of course it deters, but that's not really the issue. The issue for you when you ask that question is, does it deter more effectively than its principal alternative, life without parole? And again, the recent studies show yes. Those studies, by the way, do not show up in the New York Times once again. They do not show up, and they do not show up in leading media, which take their lead from the New York Times. I have primary evidence that the death penalty does in fact deter. For example, I spent some time with killers inside Lorton Prison, and there was one particular guy who told me of a story in which he was robbing a drug dealer in Virginia, and he was surprised to find that there were many more kilos of coke than he thought were inside the house, and he decided to kill him. And he sent his co-robbers outside to do it alone so there would be actually no witnesses to the killing. And he had the gun to his head. He had him duct taped and helpless, and he had the gun to his head, and then he didn't kill him. And I asked him, why didn't you kill him? And he said, well, what went through my mind was two things. One were thoughts when I was a child. I used to go to the parking lot of the D.C. jail, and I used to look up through the window, and I saw the electric chair through the window. And I thought about the electric chair, and I thought about myself in the electric chair. And the other was the electric chair that was in the penitentiary that I served time in Virginia. And so I didn't really want that to happen. I couldn't take that. Now, that was only half the answer. It was a very interesting answer. And I said, did you ever react any differently in Washington, D.C.? And he said, oh, yeah. And he told me another story about a house of drug dealers that he broke into, got the drugs, and killed them. And I said, why? And he said, because it was D.C. and they don't have the death penalty, and I can face what they've got, because I've been in prison. I've been here in Lorton, and I knew I was coming back if they ever caught me, and I can handle it, because I have handled it, but I can't handle the chair. That's primary evidence that it is, in fact, a more effective deterrent. It's only one anecdote, but the studies are confirming it, too, even though you don't hear about it. Now, the last part of your question was, is it relevant? And my answer is no, it is not relevant. Even though I believe, and even though human nature would suggest that death is the ultimate deterrent, that the fear of death, on the balance, will alter people's behavior in a way that nothing else will, it's irrelevant. Because even if it were the greatest deterrent imaginable, if people don't deserve it, they shouldn't be executed. And even if it weren't a greater deterrent, if they do deserve to die, they should be executed. I'm a retributivist. For me, deterrence is simply irrelevant, but it is true, nevertheless.
Now, how about, what is your position on, in a state which does have the death penalty, certain district attorneys might be very vocal about their wanting to pursue such a punishment, as opposed to other district attorneys in other counties of that state that say that they clearly won't ask for it. Should statements like that be made to the press, because they may, just like you pointed out, deter certain criminals, or in a strange, obscure way, have them forum shop their crimes? I will commit this murder here because I've been in prison before, and I know he's not going to call for the death penalty, so I can thug it out. What is your position on that?
Well, there's a third kind of DA that you haven't mentioned, the one who dishonestly, like Robert Morgenthau, the district attorney of Manhattan, who says, when the appropriate set of circumstances arise, I will go for the death penalty. But the appropriate set of circumstances never arise, because Robert Morgenthau is an abolitionist who simply doesn't have the guts to be honest and state what Robert Johnson, the district attorney of Bronx, had the courage of his convictions to state, which I respect, though disagree with, and that is, Johnson said, I will never go for the death penalty. And when there was an egregious situation which quite clearly called for it under New York law, the governor of New York removed him in favor of a special prosecutor. But Morgenthau does it dishonestly. And so that, to me, is the worst of all positions. I can respect a district attorney who does that. The district attorney is elected by the people of the county. Now, it's a very difficult and deep issue, because on the one hand, we have New York law, which is supposed to uniformly apply around New York. And yet we have some district attorneys that will go for it enthusiastically, some district attorneys that will go for it reluctantly, and some district attorneys that will never go for it at all. And again, within those, some who admit it, and then others who deny it, like Morgenthau, who simply cheat and don't honestly face it. So
Please don't hold back.
What? Well, I won't. No, I've said it publicly before. I mean, let him challenge it. The record speaks for itself. There have been something like 25, maybe 35 situations that are quite clearly murder one situations. Robert Morgenthau has gone for the death penalty in 0 of those. He never has. He never will. He is an abolitionist. He just is dishonest about it, which I have no respect for whatsoever. So on the one hand, we have the district attorney who's supposed to be elected by the people of his or her county, and so is supposed to reflect the county. My guess is, I don't know, that a majority of the people in the Bronx probably are against the death penalty. I'm not sure. Robert Johnson may well reflect the people of the Bronx. Robert Morgenthau probably does not reflect the majority view of Manhattan, although he may, but at least admit it. So on the one hand, we've got a county-by-county election of prosecutors. On the other hand, we have uniform New York law. So the deep question is, should New York law be applied uniformly across New York, or should the fact that while the law that the county prosecutor applies is state legislatively enacted, the election that determines who that prosecutor is county by county? How do you resolve that tension? And I mean, there are two arguable ways of doing it. And one is to say, yes, every prosecutor has to stand election. Honestly tell the electorate what you stand for, and then face election or not, re-election. That's Robert Johnson, and I can respect that. The other is to say, no, even though you may be personally opposed to the death penalty, as the district attorney, you have the obligation to apply the law of your state. And that would be to suggest that Robert Johnson is wrong in doing it, that he's to be commended for his honesty, but that the governor is correct to move him aside anytime the death penalty comes up.
Now, you've made strong commentary towards your fellow attorneys, district attorneys.
I invite Robert Morgenthau to appear. I would welcome Robert Morgenthau to respond and state in front of any camera or public forum that he truly will go after the death penalty, and to state the circumstances that he will, because I suggest to you that whatever set of circumstances he states, should they ever arise, will be ones that he will find an exception to. There will be some reason about this case or that. It's well known. This is not to me. Ask any district attorney, ADA in Manhattan, who will speak to you off the record, and you will find the same thing. Of course Morgenthau is an abolitionist. Of course he'll never go for the death penalty. The record speaks for itself.
Clearly, I think we have to have a part 3 eventually. I'd like to wrap up this segment with, among the many fascinating statements that you've made today, one final quote that was in reference to academia. To paraphrase, it's when it comes to academia, many individuals do not want to deal with the death penalty. I am paraphrasing, but grant me that paraphrase, and okay. We'll, when we come back, we can start there.
Okay.
Thank you very much for joining us today. This is Bianca Bezdek from the Media Reporter in New York Law School. We'll see you soon.